They showed up like they were taking down a major threat: tactical units, forced entry tools, and heavy weapons. Yet the person they arrested was a 21-year-old artist. Then came the part that makes everything harder to understand. He was held without bail, but no formal charges followed. Right now, prosecutors have a deadline. The Los Angeles District Attorney must decide whether to file charges or release him. At this moment, there is no criminal complaint and no indictment. That gap between a dramatic arrest and a lack of charges...
They arrested him with tactical gear, a battering ram, and enough firepower to take down someone much more dangerous than a 21-year-old singer. Then they held him without bail. But here is where it gets weird. They have not charged him with anything. No criminal complaint filed, no grand jury indictment returned. The Los Angeles District Attorney has until Monday to decide whether to file criminal charges or let him walk out of custody like none of this ever happened. That is not how a slam dunk case works. The police did something huge, and the prosecutors are still trying to figure out if they have anything real to back it up. The singer known as d4vd, real name David Burke, was arrested on April 16th. Right now, the only thing certain is the Monday target date. Either the DA charges him or he walks, and the gap between what the LAPD did and what the DA is willing to say is wide enough to drive an entire scandal through.
Raises serious questions. It suggests law enforcement acted decisively, but the legal case may not be fully formed. The artist known as d4vd, real name David Burke, was taken into custody on April 16th. Since then, the only firm detail is the approaching decision date. His attorney immediately highlighted the absence of formal charges, stating clearly that he has only been detained based...
Let us just sit with that for a second. No complaint, no indictment. His lawyers stood up the same night he was booked and pointed that out immediately. Not because they were being clever, because it is true. They released a statement saying the actual evidence will show he did not cause her passing and he was not the one responsible. But the more important part of that statement was the first thing they mentioned. There has been no indictment returned by any grand jury in this case and no criminal complaint filed. David has only been detained under suspicion. That is not spin. That is the legal reality. The LAPD rolled up with armed officers, a battering ram, and a whole street blocked off. The DA's office, meanwhile, released a statement that felt like it was written by someone who just found out about the arrest from the news. They said they were aware. They said the case would be presented to them for review. They did not say they approved it. They did not say they were ready. They did not even say they agreed with it. Why would the DA hesitate? Let us start with the most obvious answer, because it is sitting under a court seal right now and nobody is allowed to see it. The cause of the incident has not been released. The medical examiner's records were sealed back in November at the request of the LAPD. And here is the part that should make you raise an eyebrow. The medical examiner publicly objected to that seal. The chief medical examiner said the practice of putting security holds on cases is virtually unheard of in other counties and has not been proven to improve legal outcomes. So the LAPD wanted those records hidden. The medical examiner wanted them public. That is not a small bureaucratic disagreement. That is the forensic arm of the system telling you something is off. Without information about how someone passed away, prosecutors do not have a case involving an incident. They have a body in a car and a lot of questions. If the DA looks at whatever the LAPD handed them and sees a hole they cannot climb out of, Monday becomes very simple. You cannot charge what you cannot prove.
Based on suspicion, not on a filed case. That's not spin. It's the current legal reality. While police carried out a high-intensity arrest, the DA's office responded cautiously. Their statement didn't signal approval or readiness. It simply acknowledged awareness and said the case would be reviewed. That kind of language suggests distance, not coordination. One major issue sits at the center of everything. The cause of death has not been made public. The medical examiner's report was sealed months ago at the request of law enforcement, unusually.
But the sealed autopsy is only the first problem. The second problem is the relationship between the LAPD and the DA's office. By every signal coming out of this case, those two agencies are not on the same page. Legal analysts have been pointing to tension for weeks. Mark Garagos laid it out on his podcast. The DA was not ready to bring charges, but the LAPD got frustrated with the delays and decided to make the arrest anyway. basically forcing the DA's hand, that is still in the realm of insider chatter and legal speculation. The DA's office has denied any conflict. But look at how they have behaved. They did not announce the arrest. They did not stand next to the LAPD at a press conference. They put out a quiet statement saying they were aware. That is not the language of a partnership. That is the language of an office that just got handed a ticking clock and told to figure it out. If the reports are true, then the arrest was not the final step of a coordinated prosecution. It was a power move. The police department said we are done waiting, and now the DA has to either charge him by Monday or release him and explain to everyone why this fell apart. Then there is the grand jury. This is where the case gets genuinely strange. A grand jury had been hearing evidence since November. Witnesses were called. One of them, a friend of Burke named Neo Langston, was actually arrested in Montana for failing to appear. He was brought back to Los Angeles in handcuffs to testify. That is not something that happens when everyone is calm and cooperative. That is something that happens when someone is trying not to talk. After all that testimony, after months of presenting evidence behind closed doors, no indictment was returned. Legal experts have pointed out that this might have been an investigative grand jury that does not have the power to indict. That is a real possibility. But it is also possible that the grand jury heard what the DA had and decided it was not enough. Either way, the absence of an indictment is a problem. The LAPD arrested Burke without one. That is unusual. That is procedurally strange. It leaves the DA in a position where they have to decide whether to move forward with a case that already could not clear the lowest legal bar. The defense is already leaning on that fact like a crutch. Their statement did not just say he is innocent. It specifically pointed out that there is no indictment and no criminal complaint. That is the foundation of their argument. They are not just saying the evidence will clear him. They are saying the legal machinery that is supposed to exist before someone gets handcuffed does not exist here. The more you look at the pieces, the harder it is to ignore how fragile this whole thing looks. The cause of the outcome is sealed. The medical examiner objected to the seal. The grand jury returned nothing. The DA's office is not acting like a partner. They are acting like a reviewer who just got handed a messy file and told to clean it up by Monday.
The medical examiner objected to that decision, noting that such secrecy is rare and not proven to help cases. That disagreement inside the system is significant. Without clarity on how the victim died, prosecutors face a serious obstacle in building any charge. There also appear to be signs of tension between investigators and prosecutors. Some legal observers, including Mark Garagos.
And here is where it gets even darker. While the legal system is stuck between two contradictory certainties, the rest of the world has already moved on. The brands have already pulled out. Crocs and Hollister yanked their campaigns. His tour was canceled. The deluxe edition of his album was shelved. He has already lost everything that made him famous, and the DA has not even decided whether to charge him yet. That is the part that does not get talked about enough. The court of public opinion does not wait for an indictment. It does not wait for a cause of cessation. It saw the body in the trunk, saw the matching tattoos, saw the age difference, and made up its mind. Whether he walks on Monday or not, the career is already gone. The tours are not coming back. The brand deals are not coming back. The narrative is already written. So even if the DA refuses to charge, even if the forensic hole is too deep and the case collapses, nobody is going to remember that distinction. They are going to remember the arrest. They are going to remember the battering ram. They are going to remember that the police thought he did it, and that was enough.
Have suggested that the police may have acted before prosecutors were ready, potentially forcing their hand. While officially denied, the behavior of both offices doesn't reflect a unified front. Then there's a grand jury process. Evidence has reportedly been presented since late 2025, with witnesses.
So what happens Monday? Nobody knows. That is the honest answer. The DA could file charges and move forward with a case that has no public information about the individual's status, no indictment, and a fractured relationship between the two agencies that are supposed to be working together. Or they could refuse to charge, release him from custody, and hand the LAPD a humiliation that will take years to live down. Neither outcome is clean. Neither outcome resolves the instability. The only thing that feels certain is that whatever decision comes down on Monday, it is not going to answer the questions that have been hanging over this case for months. It is not going to tell us what the autopsy says. It is not going to tell us why the grand jury did not indict. It is not going to tell us why the medical examiner objected to the seal or why the LAPD and the DA seem to be working from different playbooks. It is just going to be a decision, charge or walk, and whichever way it goes, the mess underneath is not going anywhere.
Witness is compelled to testify, including one who was arrested for failing to appear. Despite that effort, no indictment has emerged. Whether that's because the jury lacked authority or because the evidence wasn't strong enough, the result is...
You want to talk about how this story gets wider? Start with the family. Celeste's father waited more than a year to say anything publicly. He watched the investigation stall. He watched the autopsy get sealed. He watched a grand jury meet in secret and then apparently produce nothing. Then, after the arrest, he finally spoke. 2 words. Thank God. 2 more. Justice for Celeste. That is not a man celebrating a conviction. That is a man who has been told over and over that the system is working while watching it move at a crawl. Now the family plans to be at the courthouse on Monday. They plan to sit through the arraignment if charges are filed. They plan to stand outside whatever press conference the DA holds. They are not going to let this case fade away, and that changes the calculation for everyone involved. It is one thing to look at evidence and decide it is not strong enough. It is another thing entirely to look at a grieving father and tell him no.
Same. The case hasn't cleared a basic legal threshold. The defense is already leaning heavily on that point. Their argument isn't just that their client is innocent. It's that the system hasn't even established a foundation required to justify the arrest in the first place. Looking at the situation as a whole, it appears fragile. Key evidence is sealed. Internal disagreement exists. No indictment has been issued. Prosecutors seem cautious.
Now look at what was happening inside that rental house long before the arrest. A private investigator hired by the property owner went through the place after police finished their search. His name is Steve Fisher. He says he found items that made no sense in a Hollywood Hills home. Farm tools, he called them. Still in original packaging. Things that had no reasonable use in that neighborhood. He did not give specifics, but he described them as sadistic. Said they went beyond simple tools. Owning unusual things is not a crime. But when those things are found in a house where a missing teenager was last seen alive, and when that teenager later turns up in your car, the accumulation starts to feel heavier than coincidence. Police have not confirmed anything about those items. They have not said they were connected, but the private investigator was not hired by a tabloid. He was hired by the homeowner who wanted to know what happened on his property. The property transfer is another piece that looks worse the closer you examine it. 2 weeks after the body was found, Burke transferred ownership of one of his Texas homes to his mother's name. The body was discovered on September 8th. The transfer happened on September 23rd. That is tight. That is not a routine financial move planned months in advance. That is a reaction. Whether it was legal advice or panic, the appearance is terrible. It looks like someone trying to shield assets before a lawsuit or a criminal case lands. His lawyers would probably say it was standard planning. But standard planning does not usually happen 2 weeks after a dismembered body is found in your car. Standard planning happens in calm moments, not in the middle of a media firestorm. If there is nothing to hide, why move anything at all?
Yet the public reaction has already moved ahead. That's the part that often gets overlooked. The legal system moves slowly.
Then there is the trip to Santa Barbara. LAPD confirmed that Burke traveled to that area in the spring of 2025. They would not say why. They would not say what he did there. They specifically said they had drawn no conclusions about the relevance of the trip. But here's the thing. If it meant nothing, you do not put it in a press release. You do not acknowledge it publicly unless it is something you are looking at closely. Media reports suggested he went to a remote area in the middle of the night and stayed for several hours. That is not a day trip to the beach. That is not a tourist visit. That is the kind of travel that looks very different when you are investigating a case where a body was found in someone's car months later. Police are not saying it was connected, but they are also not saying it was not. And that silence is doing a lot of work.
But public judgment doesn't. Major brands like Crocs and Hollister have already ended partnerships.
The cooperation story is another mess that nobody has cleaned up. Early on, a spokesperson for Burke said he was fully cooperating with authorities. Then LAPD sources told reporters something very different. Not cooperative. Those are not the same thing. Either the spokesperson was misinformed or something changed behind the scenes. Maybe he cooperated at first and then stopped. Maybe the spokesperson was trying to control the narrative. Either way, the contradiction sits there unresolved. When you are building a case, cooperation matters. It matters what someone says to detectives. It matters whether they hand over phones and computers. It matters whether they answer questions or lawyer up. The public does not know which version is true, but the fact that both versions exist out in the open tells you that someone is not being straight. The grand jury did not just hear from friends and associates. Burke's own parents were subpoenaed, his father, his mother, his brother. They fought those subpoenas in Texas courts. They argued that being forced to testify violated their rights. A Texas appeals court denied their petition and ordered them to comply. That is not a small thing. When a family fights a subpoena that hard, it is usually because they do not want to talk. When the target of an investigation has parents who are willing to go to court to avoid testifying, you have to wonder what they are afraid of saying. Not what they know, what they are afraid of saying out loud under oath. That is a different kind of pressure. That is a family closing ranks.
Tours have been canceled. Music releases have been delayed. Regardless of what happens in court, the damage to his career has already happened. Even if prosecutors decide not to move forward, the public memory will focus on the arrest, the scale of it,
The burn cage is still out there too, just sitting in the background. The private investigator claimed to have found a high-temperature incinerator on the property, something advertised to burn at 1600 degrees. Police have not publicly connected it to the case. They have not said it was used. But the fact that it was there at all, on a rental property in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, is strange. You do not accidentally order an industrial incinerator. You do not have one delivered to a Hollywood Hills home for routine yard work. If it was never used, why was it there? If it was used, what was burned? Those questions do not have public answers yet, but they hang over everything else. The longer they go unanswered, the more people fill in the blanks themselves.
imagery, the accusations. That perception is hard to reverse. Now, as the decision date approaches, the uncertainty remains. Prosecutors could proceed with a case that still lacks publicly confirmed details, or they could decline to charge and release him, leaving law enforcement to explain why such a major operation led nowhere. Neither outcome resolves the deeper issues. Questions about the sealed report.
The music is impossible to ignore, even though it proves nothing. His breakout song is called Romantic Homicide. The lyrics include lines about not even regretting it. The music video for that song shows a body being placed in the trunk of a car. Another video for a track called One More Dance shows him putting a bloodied body into a trunk. His tour theme included a casket at the entrance, a guest book where fans could pay condolences, and a shirt covered in bloody handprints. That was all part of the show before anyone knew Celeste's body was in his Tesla. Now millions of people are watching those videos differently. That does not mean the art caused what happened, but it does mean the art now looks like a premonition. That is not a good look for anyone trying to claim this is all a giant misunderstanding.
The grand jury and the coordination between agencies will remain unanswered. Beyond the legal system, the human side adds another layer. The victim's family, including her father, has waited a long time for answers. After months of silence, he finally spoke publicly following the arrest.
The Brands did not wait for answers. Crocs and Hollister pulled their campaigns immediately. The deluxe edition of his album was shelved. His entire tour was canceled. He went from opening for SZA and playing Coachella to radio silence in a matter of weeks. That is the thing about this kind of scandal. The legal system moves slowly, but the market does not. The court of public opinion does not wait for an indictment. It sees a body in a trunk, matching tattoos, and a song called Romantic Homicide, and it makes up its mind instantly. Whether he walks on Monday or not, those brand deals are not coming back. Those tour dates are not getting rescheduled. The infrastructure of his career has already collapsed. The DA could decide there is not enough evidence to charge him, and it would not matter. He has already lost everything that made him famous. So now let us bring this back to Monday. The same target from the first half of this story, the same binary choice. But the weight on that decision has grown heavier with every layer we have added. The family waiting in the courthouse hallway, the strange items found in the rental house, the property transfer that looks like asset protection, the midnight trip to Santa Barbara, the parents fighting subpoenas, the burn cage that nobody will explain, the art that now looks like a confession even though it is not evidence. All of that is now sitting on the same Monday date. The DA is not just deciding whether to charge a celebrity. They are deciding whether to move forward with a case that has a sealed autopsy, no indictment, and a fractured relationship between the police and the prosecutors. They are deciding whether to tell a grieving father that justice is coming or that the system cannot deliver it,
while leaving many others unresolved. And that's what makes the situation so unstable. No matter what happens next, the uncertainty doesn't disappear.
What would you do if you were the prosecutor? And more importantly, what does it say about this case that those are the only two options left? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We will be back the second the decision drops. Talk soon.